Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude, welcome back, and today we are going to be taking a look at what is now Tropical Depression 9, soon to be potentially Tropical Storm, Hurricane, and maybe even Major Hurricane Ian. This is going to be a really interesting video, so stick around. So yeah, ever since like Fiona really got going in terms of strengthening, I've been sort of keeping an eye on it, and it was getting interesting because, it was tracking near the Caribbean, or at least that's what it was forecast to go near some of the islands. But now that we're getting, a couple more days ahead, and we're starting to see where this thing could go after that, and it looks very interesting. And hint, hint, for you guys in Florida, it's going to be especially interesting. But first, just want to go real quick through what is left of Fiona here, and it's about to wreak havoc, all right, on like Nova Scotia. All right, you can see, and not too long from now, like pretty much by early Saturday morning, it's going to be up and away, Nova Scotia, and then eventually into Newfoundland as well. All right, so definitely want to keep an eye out there because winds, at least according to the Euro, could be at 100 miles an hour. The Hurricane Center is calling for about 105 sustained winds. Gusts could go to 140, maybe near Sydney, maybe more like 90, but that could go up towards 100. So maybe, major hurricane wind gusts, maybe they get to 115, and the waves are going to be absolutely ridiculous. Like, we're talking like 40 to 45 foot waves, and I'm sure locally higher. As you know, the East Coast has been feeling some waves, 5, 10 feet, maybe closer to 10 offshore. But this is going to be, they're going to see some crazy winds up there, crazy wind, rain. So definitely be careful. And again, this is all like the waves. The waves are arriving like now because it's 5:48 Eastern time. So they're probably arriving right now. But building over the next couple hours and just the waves heights exploding as the wrath of the storm comes in by early tomorrow morning. But again, that's Fiona. We're going to focus now all on Tropical Depression 9, or what is Tropical Depression 9 right now. Watch, it'll be a tropical storm when I'm done recording, but I hope not. But looking pretty disorganized, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. But you can see there's definitely a spin, but it's kind of, there's just convection sitting on top of it. It's not, the convection's not swirling around the storm. Although again, you can see there definitely is some convection there. All right, so that's what there's definitely some spin there and convection as well. And you can see right here where most of the convection is, kind of like, again, over the center of the storm. And wind shear not looking too bad right now. I mean, at least just judging from the satellite perspective. Wind shear is pretty light, but again, that could change in the short term. Winds are 30 knots, which means that sustained winds are approximately 35 miles an hour. So it's approaching, it's 4 miles an hour away from tropical storm territory. But again, the wind does matter, but another very important component of whether it forms or not is the organization. 1,006 on the pressure. So, there's really pressure is a little different because pressure can be lower or higher. It's very variable, but for a tropical storm, 1,006 millibars, I've definitely seen tropical storms with that pressure level is what I'll say, but that doesn't really guarantee anything. The current location, I'll refresh to see if there's been any changes. Not really. Well, the map did update, but this I think only updates every so often. But as of 2 p.m., the low pressure was sitting at about 70.5 degrees west and about 14.5 degrees north, approximately, if you want to know the exact coordinates. Now look at the tracks. Now, these look very interesting, and a few maps later, I'm going to tell you why. This might ring some bells to about 18, actually just about 18 years ago. All right, and again, I'll explain a little bit for those of you who may not remember or don't know. But honestly, the uncertainty is pretty high with this storm. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, even 24 hours out, like you would think models usually within 48, if not 48, definitely 24 hours, that they're a lot more in agreement, but not really, not at least these models. We've got, it could be because of the outliers, because most of the models are in agreement for the most part, but even 48 hours, there's a few models to the right and a few models to the left. So, there's nothing, especially, too certain about 48 hours. Although the general consensus is about here. Right? But again, expect a general track to come up, kind of going west and then turn northwest and eventually due north, going over western Cuba somewhere, and where it goes over Cuba will be very important. Again, I'll be talking about that in a little bit. And then according to these models, again, in about 5 or 6 days, or 7, depending on which model you're looking at, 5 to 7 days out, it could be making a Florida landfall. And especially you guys in the peninsula, at least as of right now, I'm more concerned about you guys in the peninsula. And then where it goes after that, again, pretty uncertain. Again, even Florida's uncertain, so we're just going to focus in on that for now. Now the Gfs model tracks, again, I don't expect any changes, but I'll just refresh every time just in case. Again, about a due west track and then turning north somewhere. Now, the Gfs model tracks, a lot more models, a lot more, different, creative solutions, if you will. Like we got this one model that wants to go over, Mexico near the Yucatan Peninsula, do a little loop and then towards Galveston. But I don't think that's going to happen for right now. But you can see by the dark reds and the pinks that pressure will get anywhere between 940 and 960 millibars. Or I should say 960 to 940 if you want to go from weakest to strongest. But yes, pressure could get very low. And even a couple models are doing kind of a sort of a Hurricane Sandy type. Well, I mean, Hurricane Sandy came from over here, but still, kind of like the hook in kind of always reminds me of Sandy. I mean, that is possible. Spoiler alert, the Euro sort of shows something like that, but not really. It doesn't go up into New Jersey and New England. Actually, this one track kind of reminds me of Henri. I think it was last year. The one where I kind of like went in, did a little loop, and then swirled in this way. I think that was Henri. But again, general consensus, though, is for it to go over Western Cuba and then into the Eastern Gulf, and then exactly where after that is a little uncertain for the moment. If we look at GEPS, again, same thing, except a little bit more spread out here. And again, let me see if there's more refresh for any more details. No, okay. So here is TD9. All right, here's like the strength charts. And again, now actually it doesn't seem like they have a lot of agreement, but there actually is sort of a general consensus of the models if you look closely. I would say most of the models, I would say 95% of the models are predicting at least a Cat 1 hurricane at some point. And I would say out of those models, so out of that 90%, I would say like 95% of that would be at least a Cat 2, and even some bring it to a Cat 3. But again, the strength is also very uncertain right now, but there are some factors that are working for this storm for sure. Now, this is what I'm talking about here. You look at this and you think, wait a minute, what does this remind me of? Think back 18 years, yeah, Hurricane Charlie. And I just saw like where it was making landfall, or where they predicted to make landfall, right around Cape Coral, and I was like, wait a minute, this is just like Charlie. So I just pulled up now. Again, I really wasn't alive in 2004, and even if I was, I would have been, very little, even if I was, early. But even so, like I do not remember Charlie's track that much, except for that, it went into southwestern Florida. And this looks just like Charlie, like sort of like it's going in the center of the Caribbean, going west, northwest, and then turning north over Western Cuba, and then going into Florida. I mean, at least that part of the track looks exactly like Charlie. And again, pretty much exactly 18 years, because it's only about a month off, but pretty much 18 years since Charlie. So how, I don't want to say cool, because it's not cool for Florida, but how crazy would that be if that were to happen? And again, I'll do another spoiler alert, but Euro's track kind of takes it up like here. Now, except they kind of bend it inland a little bit instead of going like this, like Charlie did. But this is looking very similar to Hurricane Charlie right now, which is the reference I was alluding to earlier. Now, National Hurricane Center is predicting a hurricane by the time we get to early on Monday, around 2 a.m. on Monday. So right around Georgetown here, all right, Kingston, you guys are under the tropical storm watch, because it's going to be missing you guys. I mean, you're at this point in this like short term, if you're outside of the cone, I don't think you're going to be seeing much in terms of impacts, but you still could see some wind, so maybe some bands, so definitely be on the lookout. But Georgetown, where even though it's more quote-unquote uncertain, you guys are in the cone, and it is projected to be a hurricane, so definitely want to look out. I mean, it could be a Category 1 hurricane by then. And then making its way to the north. Oh, now the button works. Okay, 90 miles an hour here. Okay, that one spot doesn't work for some reason. 90 strengthening to an upper Cat 2 and even a Cat 3 before it closes in there on Tampa. Right, or at least that's the landfall that they are projecting for right now. All right, so again, looking in here, definitely could track to the left or to the right of the cone. And for some reason, the drawing tool is not letting me draw. Oh, now it's starting to let me. Okay, on some parts of the map, it's not letting me draw on, which is really weird. I've never done that, but it could go on the right side of the cone. It could even go on the left side. Again, I'm trying to, it won't let me draw on certain parts, so I'm trying to accommodate for that. But you get the point. Could go to the, it could even go outside of the cone. We've certainly seen that. I mean, we've certainly seen storms go outside of their predicted cone from a few days before, so that's certainly also a possibility. So I want to kind of zoom in on number 3 here. So early next week, the system is going to move over western Cuba, or at least forecast to, as a strengthening hurricane and approach Florida, and especially the peninsula. We could see significant storm surge, hurricane winds, and heavy rain. It is certainly too early to determine the exact impacts and magnitude. But yeah, definitely have your plan because this storm is anywhere from 5 to 7 days away. According to the Hurricane Center, it's Wednesday, I think, is the 28th. So it's about 5 days away. I mean, less than that because that's Wednesday morning. So, and impacts generally come a little bit before that. So we're talking like less than 5 days away, 4.5 to 5 days away. So you don't have much time. So definitely, even if you live even if you live in the peninsula, like I would say anywhere in the Gulf Coast from like New Orleans to Florida, you guys should definitely be on the lookout. I would say if you're west of New Orleans, for now you're pretty all right, but it can't hurt to be prepared, of course. Texas, I think you're fine from this one, but because of the way we're going to see the steering, it's going to be strong at first, pushing it west and then kind of weakening. So it's going to cause the storm to bend up to the north. If by some reason the strengthening does not weaken, Texas, Louisiana, I will let you know, but for right now, this is how it's looking. If we look at, where is it? Yes, the tropical storm force wind probabilities. Again, the peninsula, in the Georgia, you guys do have a chance. So again, definitely be on the lookout. But for right now, the higher, I won't say high, but the higher certainty is around Cuba and western and southwestern in terms of some of those tropical storm force wind impacts. I wasn't going to show hurricane speed, but I mean, I guess I can. Don't think, oh, it's not going to be a hurricane or it barely will, barely any chances. That's only because things are uncertain right now. Trust me, this will go up over time if this, forecast track holds. Here we have, or we will have pretty soon, the sea surface. No, the colors were working and they decided to disappear, but we got them back. All right. So where the storm is right now, about mid 80s, and it's going to get extremely more conducive. I mean, right now it's in a pretty good environment, but it's going to get extremely more conducive. You might think, but why? I mean, it went up 1 degree on the sea surface temperatures, maybe 2. It's not just the sea surface temperatures you have to look at, remember. So that's something we're going to be taking a look at in a little bit. 85 to 86, it's not a big change. It really, it helps for the hurricane or potential would-be hurricane, but actually 88 right below Havana. But at that point, it's pretty much close to land, so the 88 doesn't really matter. So after it goes over Cuba and goes over into the Eastern Gulf, where water is about, again, 86, about a degree higher than it is right now. Now, where it goes over Cuba, as I was alluding to earlier, does matter because the mountainous areas of Cuba are right here, basically between Havana and Pinar del Rio, kind of like in this region. Even over here, there are a little bit of mountains, but, most of the mountain activity is here. I say mountain activity like it's, and more farther to the south as well. So here's the thing. If it goes further east, it kind of avoids the mountains, and that would be better for the storm, but at the same time, unless they for some reason hooked a sharp right, it would have less time over water to strengthen after that. However, if the storm went over western Cuba, and I've seen storms, especially like the last 2 years, kind of go over western Cuba. I think it was the last couple of years storms have done this, at least once. They go over western Cuba, and they kind of weaken a little bit, and then they go over the jet stream, the Gulf Stream, and then there's a little bit of lag time for the effects to take in, and then it strengthens right around here. So if it goes over this part of western Cuba, yes, the mountains may weaken it at first, but it's going to have more time to strengthen over water, and it will have more influence of the Gulf Stream, which will just make the storm even stronger. As if the warm water and warm depths of the water weren't enough, the Gulf Stream would just intensify that even more. Now, dry air, really none to be found, like not even a little bit. Like at least near where the storm is, like literally the Caribbean has no dry air, Saharan dust at least. There's a little, I guess you could call it like a kind of like a frontal. It's in the shape of a front that's kind of falling from north to south here. A little bit of dry air, but that'll probably either just move south away from the storm, kind of like this direction, or fade out potentially in the process. Shouldn't be a big deal for a TD9 at least. There's a dry air. You got the northern winds, coming by in Fiona. Dry air is wrapping around in it. You got their front coming through. So definitely a lot of. I wouldn't. This isn't Saharan dust, right? Once you get like over here, it kind of just becomes a measure of dry air because Saharan dust can make it that far, but this I can tell looks like it's just from the front. So I don't think this is Saharan dust, but this over here is. That's the kind of stuff that'll give you those pretty sunrises and sunsets. Now, why did I say things are going to get extremely more conducive, right? Because look where it's sitting right now. Now again, sea surface temperatures important, but just as, if not more important, I think more important, are the sea surface temperatures, or the heat content at least. This doesn't tell you the temperatures, but the heat content below the ocean surface. If these were temperatures of the ocean, I'd be very concerned. But where it's sitting right now, kind of like, again, Central Caribbean, you got to measure about 125 around there, kind of like in those brighter reds. Wake gets to 150, and obviously by the dark red, over 150. All right. I don't know if there's really a unit. I think there might be a unit, but we're just going by the numbers here and like the colors. You can see there's extreme heat content right below Cuba here. All right, and the storm, remember, is going to track like this. So it's going to be in that zone I was going to call the extreme conducive zone probably for a while. Probably it'll be in that zone from about Sunday morning till possibly late Monday. So that's like a good 36-ish hour chunk in that extremely conducive zone. And then it's going to go over the Gulf Stream. So if you count that, that's about 48 hours. All right. So it could have a good couple days inside that zone. So that's why we're definitely seeing a rapid concern for strengthening, especially upon approaching Cuba. All right, now we're getting ready to get into the model segment pretty soon as we wrap up here, but let's first get to the wind shear map. All right, here's Gaston over here. All right, and then we got Hermine out there somewhere. It might be that low. I think that might be Hermine. And then we got Fiona right here. Fiona's just caught up in shear. Honestly, it's the National Hurricane Center, unless I may have to refresh, but it says it's still a hurricane right now. It's definitely post-tropical because there's crazy wind shear with it right now. Actually, let me check here. Let me go to. Let me see. No, it's still hurricane. Well, that was as of 5 p.m. Yeah, it's still a hurricane, Category 3, and moving at 40 miles an hour. Yeah, that's how you know. Those post-tropical storms definitely do move very fast. But anyway, wind shear. It's not bad right now, but for a storm this week, any kind of wind shear can really tear it apart. The wind shear does look to weaken drastically, like probably cut in half, going from about 20, 30 knots down to about 10 or 20. So definitely wind shear will be reducing or going down, and it has gone down in the past 24 hours by 5 to 10 in most areas, knots. Now here's the models, and apparently there's high traffic on tropical tidbits. I don't know if that's because of the sudden, spike in interesting tropical weather finally. Maybe people are just rushing on. But yeah, there is some high traffic, so definitely be on the lookout for that. I personally have been fine, so maybe it'll be okay for you guys too. But now, here's the funny thing about the GFS. They actually, so kind of like how I said, it would either be, going up here and like less water time or ocean time, or over here, more mountains but more ocean time, because that's the way Florida is kind of shaped. But what GFS does is do an even better case scenario for the hurricane, at least, than that. Is they have it barely even touching Cuba. That might not even be a landfall. It might be. It's on the western tip, and just kind of like going around it completely, and still getting a lot of water time, if you want to call it that. So going up and kind of stalling near Florida. This thing sits there from like late Tuesday, early Wednesday, all the way through, afternoon on Friday. So that's a good couple of days of it just sitting there. And, you got to take into account the storm's arrival and departure. So that's probably a good 3 days that Florida will be impacted. And then, boom. And then all that energy gets carried into the mid-Atlantic, those remnants of the storm. Looking like a very impactful storm. Now, here you have the high pressure, right? And it's building in here. It's not weakening like it did with Fiona, which caused Fiona to go out to sea. And you sort of got this high pressure, and that's going to cause the storm kind of right up like this. Now, again, maybe a trough comes down here. If that high was a little bit further south, maybe it can get an escape route, but I'm not sure that's going to happen quite yet. especially considering there's another little high pressure that could kind of overbear like this, that could kind of tug the storm west a little bit as well, and then that trough can maybe pick it up and go in this direction. Again, it's very uncertain, but I'm just listing kind of like the scenarios for you right now. Here's a better look at the 500 millibar heights. Again, storm is very clearly marked here, I'm sure. Now again, freeze frame right here, if it was to move, I mean, it could go in this direction, but again, how much impact does that high pressure have on it? Well, let's go forward a little bit. Here we go in the Wednesday. The trough kind of recedes. It doesn't really pick it up in time, right? Kind of like missed its chance, if you will. And now the high pressure is starting to become, again, more overbearing and kind of making the storm move slower, for one. That's why it was stalling like that. But also keeping its a little westerly tug. It's not too strong of a high pressure. And there's also a similarly strength high pressure over here. And that's going to kind of go like this. So, I mean, it's going to be, one storm's going to be pushing, the other's going to be tugging back at it. Now, one of these high pressures will eventually kind of weaken off, if you will, now be the one to the east. All right, so there's still a high pressure here, but pretty weak. And got kind of blockade over here. So, again, that could push it in another direction. That could keep it stalled for a little bit more. And eventually that high to the north will retreat and then now cause the storm to move its way to the north. All right, so here we have the GFS model. Let's kind of skip ahead here to like Monday or Tuesday, if it will let me skip ahead. Please let me skip ahead. All right, here we go. So in the Monday, here you go. Let's actually, we're on wind gust. Okay, good. Winds gusting to about 85 miles an hour. Now, I like to keep on gust because sometimes the models kind of underdo, at least on here, they kind of underdo the sustained winds. Right, because the GFS showed a really strong storm, but then it only shows like a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. So I kind of, at least when I'm looking at it, I kind of treat wind gust as the sustained winds, because on the GFS, I mean, you saw it too. They showed a really intense storm. Like, purples are really strong on this map, so I can't imagine it only being a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm on the same model in the same model run. So again, you don't have to, but at least what I do is I like to treat the wind gust as a sustained wind, at least on windy.com here. So 90-mile-an-hour winds as it moves over Cuba, right? That western tip of Cuba, and then moves to the north, kind of sits there and stalls. It's looking really, circular and symmetrical there. 90-mile-an-hour wind gust, again, pretty similar. It's going to sit there, stay similarly strength or strengthen, and then kind of make landfall somewhere near Apalachicola, going to the model run. Again, this is like September 30th. All right, finally, it's on shore. All right, so a lot of rain to be had here. GFS rainfall, let's go out here to about 5. Okay, this website is pretty buggy today. All right, so here's the next 5 days. So that would take us out to about the 28th. I'm not sure if that's quite enough, so we'll go out 10 days. And this, I think, shows it better. Yeah, 22 inches of rain offshore, but even like Orlando, 5 inches. Palm Bay, 5 to 8, closer to 8. Tampa, around 5. But again, this is definitely going to change. And look at the western tip of Cuba, over a foot of rain. And remember, that doesn't count the additional feet of water from storm surge, should that happen. And even more beach erosion and water, if the wave, of course, the big waves could also, the waves, I wouldn't say the waves add to the totals, but they do kind of add to that beach erosion factor, if you will. All right. That's actually just while we're here. Let's just flip over to Euro to show the rainfall totals. Yeah. Now, again, they're a little bit more bent to the east, right? And then, so if we zoom out a little bit, they kind of have the storm going like this, and then kind of wiggling its way, right, left, until it curves inland a little bit. Now, places like Tampa, again, about 4 inches here, on that eastern tip, kind of like in that first coast, the Space Coast. Over a foot of rain, Orlando about 8 inches, Miami 7 inches, same for Boca Raton. Cape Coral about 11 inches. That's a lot of rain. Here we go to the GEM model here. Again, very similar, except going right over those mountains. All right, you can see right there. It's pretty much right where the mountains are located over western Cuba. Storm doesn't seem to lose too much. I don't know if models take. I think they do take land interaction into account. I don't know if they take mountain interaction into account though. Because whenever I see them, like the models move a storm over like Puerto Rico or something, Puerto Rico is pretty mountainous. Same thing with like Dominican Republic. They don't show too many things happening to it. So we'll see how much it holds together after that. And there's your landfall here again, closer. I would say closer to like Tallahassee. All right, maybe like I think Port St. Joe's over here as well. Mexico. Or I'm sorry, Mexico City, Mexico Beach, wrong place. But yeah, definitely a lot of places here in Florida, and then it could be impacted by the storm, and then kind of making its way to the northeast, somewhere around the mid-Atlantic, and then kind of curving offshore immediately. And finally, the European model here again. Now it was kind of talking about with my other scenario, right? Going over here or going over here, and it kind of does that initial approach, kind of like going a little bit more east, less time over water, but again, due to that extremely conducive zone, still hits Cape Coral in the Hurricane Charlie fashion, probably as a hurricane at least, possibly major hurricane. Then comes right into the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then kind of zips on to the north, right? Kind of like sort of like this. So you guys in the mid-Atlantic over here would be impacted because, again, east of the storm center. Again, there's a lot to work out with the system, but I wanted to get into it because it's kind of, again, not exciting for Florida, but it's exciting in general that, there's finally some action in the tropics. It's exciting to talk about, not exciting when it happens. We'll say that. But thank you guys for watching. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.